amount of stress that brings to veterans needs to be talked about.
It's a law meant to help veterans with cancer get easier access to benefits.
The denial of the claim really hit hard.
Why the VA is admitting a mistake after saying one woman's service isn't to blame for her disease.
That's astronomically expensive.
A Racine community theater shocked to find its tickets for sale at a huge markup.
These people can just gouge pricing and swindle people out of their money.
Why its only way to fight back is by raising the alarm. From the FOX6 studios, this is Open Record. I'm Bryan Polcyn. I'm joined by Sarah Smith. Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
And we are joined by Contact 6's Jenna Sachs. Hello, Jenna.
Hi.
We are recording this episode on Wednesday, May 14th for release tomorrow, Thursday, May 15th. Today, we're going to talk about a couple of recent Contact 6 reports. Usually people write to Contact 6 because they want a refund or they want a bill waived or something like that. Both of the stories we're discussing today started with people who reached out for a different reason. To raise awareness. One is a veteran who was wrongly denied disability benefits. The other, a nonprofit theater feeling helpless about what they call price gouging. We'll dive into both of those stories when we come right back. We're back on Open Record. Sonia Schneider is a Gulf War veteran who joined the National Guard right out of high school in 2003. Today, she's a police officer in Waukesha, and last year, she learned she had stage 1 ovarian cancer. She was having problems claiming benefits under something called the PACT Act. Before we get into what that is, Jenna, what can you tell us about how her cancer was discovered?
So Sonia was actually in pain and misdiagnosed for quite some time. So around 2016, she says she started having pelvic pain and stomach pain. And then a couple of years ago, it really intensified. She started having cramping and other symptoms, and she went to the VA around 2023, and they said, well, it may be early menopause. She's about my age. She's around 40 years old, but the pain didn't go away. She has to wear a duty belt as a police officer, and she says she couldn't wear it clipped because it was painful around her stomach. And she eventually got some ultrasounds and scans. They discovered uterine fibroids. They tried removing those, but she still had pain. So she says after quite a period of time of really fighting for care, her doctor agreed to give her a partial hysterectomy. And when they went in, they discovered a tumor on her ovary. And they removed the ovary, they removed the tumor, and diagnosed her with stage 1 ovarian cancer, which isn't a super aggressive form of cancer, but it is persistent in something she needs to be concerned about. She did not need chemo or radiation, but she did go in for a full hysterectomy following that. And thankfully, it hasn't spread since then, but she will have to have a lot of check-ins over the next decade or so to make sure that it doesn't.
So I was watching the story. First of all, you gave a little bit of background on her. So she's a Gulf War veteran. She also has law enforcement experience since she left the service, and actually was in a fairly high-profile spot. If you all remember the Darrell Brooks Waukesha parade trial, which was quite a spectacle. She actually testified as a part of that, right?
She did. So people watching this story might recognize her from that trial. She was there the day of the parade. She actually heard over the police scanner that the car was coming down the route. She rushed in and tried to stop the vehicle, but sadly she was there, one of those first officers dealing with the aftermath of that horrible event.
So let me ask this. She's a Gulf War veteran. I don't know when I'm sure you said in the story, when did she leave from that and come back into civilian life?
Ooh, I don't know the exact answer. I know she was overseas in Iraq from around 2005 to 2007, but I don't know or remember exactly when.
But it was years ago, and then in 2016 she gets this diagnosis. Is that right?
Right. She's out of service by then.
So, and I know this is going to come into our explanation of the PACT Act, but is there any direct connection between the cancer and her service in the Gulf War, or do we know that?
Well, I should probably get into the PACT Act and what it is, if that's okay first.
Absolutely.
So the PACT Act basically expands disability benefits for millions of veterans. And it basically says if you were in certain geographic regions during certain time frames, you may have been exposed to toxins. So in Iraq, there were something called burn pits. And that's where you basically take all sorts of junk and throw them in a pit, no matter what it is, just burn it to get rid of it. And sometimes you're not given protective gear. So the PACT Act says if you were in this region during this time frame, and you develop a specific cancer on the list of cancers, ovarian cancer is one of them, then you presumptively qualify for PACT Act benefits. And for Sonia, it could be thousands of dollars a month. So you were asking if she directly had exposure to burn pits? Actually, she didn't. So she was mostly in Saddam Hussein's former palaces. She was with the National Guard, and her job was to look over satellite imagery for border crossings. But the thing about the PACT Act is it has the word presumptively in there. So she doesn't have to prove that she was standing next to a burn pit on a specific day to qualify for that disability
She
coverage.
has to prove she was in that same
Yeah, in that
region.
She just has
right?
to be in that region during that year, serving her country, and to develop one of these diseases on the list.
I know years ago I had done reporting on a young woman here in the area whose father had served in Vietnam, and there was exposure to Agent Orange.
Right.
And that she went through a long, drawn-out process of trying to prove, first, that he had boots on the ground in the correct region, but then that in fact his diagnosis was connected. And at the time there wasn't a presumption. So it was a really long and intensive process, a lot of medical visits, a lot of tests, a lot of paperwork. And she was really struggling to get that. The whole, if I understand it correctly, the whole point of this is to eliminate that long drawn out process that's expensive and I'm sure very mentally draining, psychologically draining, is to say, if you were there, we're going to make this a lot, we're going to cut out the red tape.
Right. That's exactly what the
presumed.
purpose of the PACT Act was. That's a great example of it.
Did she get her care, medical care then through the VA, or was it through like her general practitioner?
She did for the most part, she went to the VA. She had to go off site for a few things. This was a frustration for her. She felt like the VA could offer more for female veterans. It's kind of a side of the story we couldn't get into because of our time limitations. But at one point, she did have to go off-site to get an ultrasound, which she thought was a pretty basic thing that they should be offering to her. But for the most part, she was getting care in the VA system.
So your story isn't that she had this presumptive thing and she got her benefits and all is happy. In fact, this thing that's supposed to be really easy to prove. She served, she got the thing that's presumptively included. She should be approved.
Covered, yeah.
Right,
But she
exactly.
got denied.
Right. So
What happened?
She did not. She filed an application for these benefits, filed a claim, and she got back a denial letter in early February, basically with conflicting information in it. It said, you are a PACT Act veteran, you would qualify presumptively for these benefits. But at the same time, it said, we do not believe that your cancer is directly linked to your service, which, again, that word presumptively should be preventing her from getting that kind of messaging. She also had a long list of secondary conditions that she was looking to get disability benefits for, things related to the ovarian cancer. Like she has a painful scar from her hysterectomy. She has mental health impacts from having a full hysterectomy. That has a huge impact on your life. So she was denied initially for all of those things related to her ovarian cancer. And the reason was partly she had gone to a medical examiner at some point who had said that they didn't feel that her cancer could be linked to her service. And the claims processor looked at that and pointed to that in her case. But again, the word presumptively is there. She doesn't have to prove that connection.
So you're getting this letter that says you have this thing that is automatically presumed to be connected, but we're looking at your record and we're saying it's not connected. How can those two things be true at the same time?
That's what she's saying. And it was an emotional reaction for her because she said it takes a lot for veterans to admit when they have a problem. She said they're often told, drink some water, get over it. But she was told this was something she would qualify for. She was told the law was very clear. And so it felt insulting to not be approved for those benefits.
So what was the next step? Are you able to appeal those?
Yes. So she did appeal. She actually went to the American Legion, which offers assistance with this kind of thing. They helped her to file a higher level appeal. And she did get a response a few weeks later. They approved her at the VA for 90% disability. She is still waiting on some residuals of that. She's got about 5 other things that she's still appealing, including fibromyalgia, other issues she's having, and she's hoping to get to 100% disability, but so far she's been approved for 90%, which comes to about $2,400 a month.
And so what happened here? I mean, why we've learned anything about why she was denied when you've got the PACT Act is very clear. Its intention is to cut out this red tape. My understanding is that part of the intention is to save the government money because it does take a lot to check some of these cases out and have medical exams and reviews and all that. This is kind of cutting out all of that and saying, if you were there and you have this, you qualify. What happened?
So we don't know specifically what happened. Her letter just basically came back now saying approved, but we do know there was this study released in December that basically said VA staff had been incorrectly processing claims when denying veterans benefits under the PACT Act for those presumptive disabilities. It basically said claims processors were requesting unwarranted examinations, which she had a medical examination for this, and it delayed processing and burdened veterans, forcing them to file more appeals. And sometimes veterans were getting underpayments or they were getting denied payments as a result of this. So the study blamed a few things for why this was happening, saying basically the PACT Act went into effect really quickly. And there were a lot of new people hired. There was a lot to learn. And that kind of quick turnaround led to mistakes being made.
So these new claims administrators getting up to speed on this law that's being quickly implemented, they're just saying there was some misunderstanding and some mistakes made?
Right, exactly. And they did recommend the VA make some changes. They recommended they update their claims processing to clarify when these medical exams and opinions are needed and when they're not, and also to develop tools that help processors when making those decisions. And the VA agreed to do those things. But Sonia had pointed to this study saying, I know it's not just me. There's proof out there that they were making these mistakes. And when we spoke with an attorney who we'll speak with later in this podcast, he said he was also hearing from quite a few people with PACT Act denials.
Are there concerns that any looming job cuts could really kind of hinder some of this processing?
Yes. So it kind of depends on who you speak with. I spoke with department service officers at the American Legion and the VFW, which are working with veterans directly on processing these cases. One said, you know, we're seeing fewer issues with this problem. The VA, did you ask about the job cuts?
Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I got distracted. So the VA department service officers basically said for the American Legion, there are a great number of workers who are being trained to process these claims right now. And it takes a very long time. He said it can take a couple of years to really bring someone up to speed.
He said, like, I wouldn't put somebody, like, let them loose on their own till at least a year, if not more.
Right. He said it takes a long time. And if the VA eliminates those claim processors in training, maybe it'll lead to things momentarily being more efficient because those processors aren't also having training responsibilities. But he said in the long term, those job cuts could be harmful because at some point you need those people in the training positions to move into those roles. So he said it could lead to longer claim times and response times in the future. He said the VA could eventually be inundated by these claims. Now, we did ask the VA about that, and they basically said, you know, we're going to run a deliberative process, find ways to improve care and benefits for veterans without cutting care and benefits for veterans. And it said, we're not talking about reducing medical staff or claims processors. We're talking about reducing bureaucracy and inefficiencies that are getting in the way of customer convenience and service to veterans. And the VA has been boasting recently that it's getting more claims processed faster than ever before. Sonia thinks that we should be pointing out that mistakes are being made at the same time, but the VA says its accuracy rate is nearly 93% over the last 3 months. And when there are rare instances where a mistake is made, they are quickly rectified. And I will say Sonia's case was pretty quickly rectified, although she would say it's not completely over yet because she's still fighting for that.
Well, and obviously that's what the VA is saying. That's their perspective on this. But we're going to talk to an attorney who sees kind of the other side of things. It's someone who represents thousands of veterans in claim denials. And he's going to weigh in on the PACT Act and some of these incorrect denials. Our interview with Jim Brzezinski, president of TABAC Law, when we come right back.
Welcome back to Open Record. Joining us now is Jim Brzezinski of TABAC Law. Jim actually used to work for the VA, and he now represents veterans when they fight their claims denials. Jim, thanks for joining us to discuss the PACT Act.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here.
So we've been discussing on this podcast the initial denial of one veteran's PACT Act benefits. In your experience, is this happening often, and what's often the reason behind an incorrect denial?
So, there are still incorrect denials on the PACT Act. I would say I agree with whoever said, I was listening to you earlier, whoever said that it's getting better. It is getting better, which, you know, I think is just a function of the law being super complicated, very wide reaching, and and on top of that, having to hire tens of thousands of new, uh, they call them raters, people on the rating board, to administer these claims, and it just takes time to learn. It's very complicated. I was sort of having flashbacks when I heard you talking about the new people and how long they should be trained before cutting them loose, because it is tough. So I would say yes, there are still incorrect denials being made, but not like there were the first year or two after the PACT Act.
So what do you see as the most common thread when these do happen? What is it just someone who's not familiar with the law, or what might be the causes of cases like Sonia's?
It could be a couple of different things. They are humans. That's part of the part of the I don't want to say the problem, because being a human is obviously not a problem, but humans do make mistakes, and I think it's probably a combination of the uh, the pressure to get as many claims done as possible, on top of the complication of the new law. One of the things that is very common is the problem that was had by I can't remember the name of the vet that the story was about, but
Sonia?
yeah, Sonia. So what happened there was the VA requested a medical exam, which it actually did need a medical exam, but what it didn't need was an opinion about the causation. So the medical exam should have been to see two things. Number one, is the cancer still active? Which, technically the only test they would need would be to look at medical records to see if it's still active. But then the second thing would be the residuals. And I heard you mention the painful scars. Sometimes there's, when it's a reproductive cancer, there's stuff with like the urinary tract or urinary frequency, things like that. So what that claims examiner did was, instead of just looking at if the cancer is still there and whether there's any residuals, they also took that examiner's or the medical examiner's opinion that it wasn't service connected, but they didn't need that because it was presumptive. The presumption is, if you're in a certain spot and you have a certain disease, we don't need any medical opinion to link the two. It's just presumed to be linked.
So even in the face of a medical opinion that is contrary to that presumption, the presumption comes out on top, right?
Oh yeah.
So the
100%.
correct action is for that claims examiner to have ignored that opinion.
That is correct. The only thing that could have possibly, trumped that opinion is if the cancer pre-existed service, but there's no evidence of that here.
Right. So I gave a brief interview of the PACT Act earlier. Who is being impacted by this new law the most, and how is it affecting their lives?
So the PACT Act actually has provisions that affect many different generations of veterans, all the way back to the vets that were exposed to Agent Orange. It not only included new conditions to be presumptive to Agent Orange, it also expanded some of the geographic regions where they now will say, yeah, you were exposed to Agent Orange if you were in this region. So it's really affected probably hundreds of thousands of veterans in a mostly positive way, other than when they make the mistake and then it's difficult and frustrating to deal with the VA. But many more veterans were able to get the help they need because of the PACT Act.
Not that we're here to debate the value or virtues of the PACT Act, but I can imagine some people saying, well, you may have people whose conditions are, have occurred naturally in ways that weren't connected to their service, who qualify under this act. Has this exploded costs in some way because we're giving benefits to people who have conditions that aren't connected, or does it save costs because you're not having to go through so much of these additional medical tests and medical opinions? Is the efficiency of this law actually saving money?
The efficiency, I don't believe, would outweigh the increase in benefits. A lot of these diseases are very serious, so like for cancer, for example. Now, Sonia or other people like her, if they can't get it service connected, they would go to their private medical physician, most likely. Um, you know, most veterans are working and probably have health insurance or something like that outside of the VA. So to bring that care into the VA is definitely costly. Um, and but it's also, when they make something presumptive, there's so many studies in place that show that there's an increased likelihood of that condition occurring, that it's very hard to refute that the service caused that condition.
And obviously, the idea here was to take away the long wait, the long drawn out process. You represent a lot of veterans. I mean, I think Jenna said you represent many who fight claim denials. What is the number one thing you see? Is this just PACT Act mistakes is one thing. What's the number one thing you see that veterans need help with or that they struggle with in this process?
So the number one thing that keeps a vet from getting the benefits that I see is when they get a bad medical opinion from one of the VA medical providers. So, what ends up happening is, there's no way for anyone to know 100% what causes a disease, right? So they have to sort of look at all the evidence, look at all of the studies and say, okay, well, here's what I know. Here's the disease. Could it possibly have caused, what's going on with the vet currently? So what ends up happening is a lot of times the vets will go to the VA, and whatever doctor is tasked with making that medical opinion, their opinion will be that it's not related. Now, of course, the word opinion is in there, so it can be refuted. And a lot of times what we end up having to do is develop the medical record a little further and then try to find our own expert opinion to say, well, it actually is related, or actually, you don't even have to say it is related. In the VA, the standard of proof is called the benefit of the doubt standard. And what that means is all you have to prove is that something is at least as likely as not related. So when our medical providers look at the evidence, they have to say, well, if there's a 50-50 chance that it could be related to the service, then the veteran is supposed to win that case.
And to be clear, you're talking about conditions outside the PACT Act, right? Because the PACT Act would be
right,
presumptive.
Yeah. Well, the PACT Act creates presumptives, but it also makes it easier for non-presumptives that are chemical exposures, where you still do need an opinion. The other thing that the PACT Act did is they require what's called a Terra memo, which basically is where they go through the vet's service records and sort of make a record of what chemicals the vet was exposed to during their time in service. So then, when you go for a service connection claim, you should see that Terra memo, and then you can see, okay, like here's all the chemicals they were exposed to. Is there any chance that any of these chemicals could be linked to what they're currently suffering from? And in that case, you do still need to get a medical opinion that links the two. But because they've done this Terra memo, it makes it a little easier for everyone.
Jim, the VA has made some technology upgrades. They're using AI now. Is that improving how claims are processed from where you stand?
I think it's too early to tell. I am seeing a higher volume of claims being adjudicated. What I can't know for sure yet is if the accuracy is still there. We'll be able to tell a little bit more, with certainty in the coming months. But I am seeing just, anecdotal evidence of claims being processed a little quicker.
When those claims are being filled out, the application process, I should say, what kind of timeline are people seeing, for the VA to either approve them? And then what's kind of the next step if they are denied? What's the timeline? I mean, are we talking weeks? Is it months?
Yeah. So just like any good lawyer, I'm going to have to say it depends. Right. The average, so let's say you're filing a new claim. And there's a couple of ways you can file a new claim. One is called a fully developed claim, where you put together your entire record, you send it through, and then it goes to this special group that does, or a special procedure where some of the development is the VA's way of saying requesting evidence from the vet or other sources. Some of the development will be skipped, so it'll be much quicker. Most claims are filed just the traditional way, where you put your condition down on the form, then the veteran goes and requests your service records, looks for medical records, asks the vet to send any medical records. So in a traditional claim, we're seeing roughly 3 to 6 months is the average of getting a first decision. Of course, there can be some variation to that, especially if they get a medical opinion, and if the medical opinion needs clarification, which happens sometimes, it can be longer. But a good estimate is most claims, I think, will be decided within that 3 to 6 month window on the first application. So then if it's denied, it depends on the reason for the denial. When there's a VA service connection claim being made, there's 3 things that need to be proven. Number 1 is that the veteran currently has a disability. Number 2 is that there's something in the service that could have potentially caused that disability. And then number 3 is the opinion linking the current disability to what happened in the service. So, if the issue is that the veteran can't, or the VA can't verify the veteran's service or the incident that happened in the service, that can be something that can be difficult to overcome. The ways that we do it are to get statements from, if the veteran is still friends with any of their people they served with, or if they have family members that are willing to family members or friends that knew them prior to the service or during the service and have actual knowledge of that happening. Well, I shouldn't say actual, because it would be probably the veteran telling them, but we can get statements from people like that. And then sometimes we can find evidence of the incident. I had one where a veteran was claiming that he was a refrigeration technician, and he was working in the morgue on the day of a helicopter crash at the base he was working at. And, he was working on the refrigeration unit for the morgue, and said he just saw body after body being brought in. Well, that never made it to his file. So when the VA, was doing the claim, they denied it because there's nothing in his file. Well, we were able to find newspaper clippings of this actual incident that line up perfectly with when he was serving and, when he was doing that job. And we sent that in and we were able to get him approved. So those are, that's one way to overcome if there's nothing showing in the service. If it's, that they don't have current disability, that one we could get statements of how they're currently being affected or medical records. And then sort of the biggest one is if they've got this current disability and they've got the service issue, but they've got a medical opinion saying no. That's one where it could take a little longer, because then we have to find experts to kind of go against that opinion.
Jim, I what I'd say, I appreciate you being here. What I gather from all of this is, for someone who is struggling with this process, you know how this works. You know what things you can do. For a lot of veterans, I imagine they come into this and this is a really scary process or frustrating process, but obviously your ability to help them is super important. We're out of time for this segment, but I really want to thank you for being on here. Jim Brzezinski, Tabak Law, thank you for your time here on Open Record.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about another Contact 6 story, and in this case, it is a nonprofit local theater working hard to keep its ticket prices down. Imagine what they thought when they found out they had tickets for sale at a markup of, am I reading this right, 2,800%?
That is correct.
Wow,
Yeah.
okay, we're going to talk about that when we come right back.
Welcome back to Open Record. I love local theater.
Me
More
too.
than much of anything. This Friday, May 16th, really exciting. Opening night for Legally Blonde, the musical at the Racine Theater Guild. But the theater, big warning, they're saying the audience, don't overpay for tickets. So how did they even figure out this was a problem?
So they've been aware of this issue for some time. So the Racine Theater Guild sells tickets on its website for at most $22 a ticket. It's really important to them to keep their prices low because they want to be a place where you can bring the whole family and not have to spend a lot of money.
And there aren't many places you can go anymore for a $22
Totally.
ticket to
No,
do anything.
and I mean,
And see a show at that, like
Right.
live entertainment.
And they really pinch pennies to keep those ticket prices low. And they have so many volunteers, like 400 volunteers a year who keep this theater going. Their performers are volunteers. But they have become aware of ticket reselling websites posting their tickets for very large markups. So over the Christmas holidays, they did the best Christmas pageant ever. And they became aware of 4 people who spent more than $100 a ticket
By the way,
for
I
their
attended
show.
that show
Did you?
because my daughter, who goes to UWM, is in the ASL Studies program, and they actually did ASL for one of these shows. It's a great
It's a
theater.
good show.
It was a fantastic performance, and $22 is quite a value for that.
Right. But they found recently with this new show, Legally Blonde, the musical, that's kind of like a hot show
Absolutely.
that they have
Yeah.
coming in right now. And StubHub had their tickets posted for $635 a piece.
$635.
Right.
I mean, look, I said it was a great show.
Yeah.
I'm
I
not
love local
paying.
theater.
It's not Broadway. I mean,
Right,
the
right.
performers are not paid.
Yeah.
There's no
My
reason
daughter
they
can tell me how the ASL thing went. I'm not. Yeah, I wouldn't go
Yeah,
for that
yeah.
kind of a price.
Wow.
Right. So we looked into this further and we found other ticket reselling websites that also had it listed the same tickets for a markup. So they were being sold for $119, $69, and $71. And the theater says when you have a show like this, which is kind of hot right now, you might be drawing people who don't normally go to their theater. They just like this specific show. And they might not go to their website initially. They just might Google Legally Blonde,
yes.
Racine Theater,
Yep.
and a bunch of other websites pop up before theirs.
course.
I think that's
selling
how
tickets.
a lot of us do it, right?
Yeah.
You search for a show and you find a
Well,
link that says
I
buy
heard
tickets.
it's coming to Racine. That's
Yeah.
what you know. I know Legally
Yeah.
Blonde is coming.
And you've heard a lot of heard about a lot of these different places. Oh, StubHub, and you see the
Right.
StubHub, so you know, hey, that's reputable. I'm going to click on that link and
Right.
use it.
Well, I think the key here is that so if they were sold out and resellers had them at $635 because that's high demand, that's supply and demand, man. That's how this works, right?
But that's not the case. So one interesting thing about these websites too, even StubHub, it says going fast, only 1% of tickets left. But if you go to this website for the Theater Guild, there are tickets left in more than 1%. So there's no reason you should be paying that much more money, not to mention the dozens or hundreds of dollars in extra fees you're going to pay by going through those other resellers. I think it's $1.50 for a fee on the Racine Theater Guild's
My
website.
guess is they've probably seen some of these resellers selling the $70 or whatever it is, which you would rather your fans or customers not spend when they can come to you directly. But maybe that wouldn't have prompted them to reach out to you. But I have a feeling when they saw $635, they said, go. Because
Right.
I think of how many people would go, well, I would love to have come to your show, but I can't afford $600 for a ticket. And they're like, we have $22
Yeah.
tickets right now.
Well, what really prompted this is a woman who works for the theater named Jocelyn Fish. She saw their tickets being promoted on Facebook through StubHub. And she was sent this link by someone. She called StubHub after seeing the $635 price tag and said, you should take this down. That, in my opinion, is price gouging. You can't just list that. That's not fair. And StubHub basically told her there's nothing illegal about this. There's nothing we can do. You just have to make your audience aware that this is happening and to go to your website.
Well, I get the sense that's kind of the purpose of your
Yeah.
story, right? Is
Right.
that awareness? Because you're right. They can list it for $1 million if they want to. It doesn't mean you have to buy it. The question is, do people know they can go right to the theater to get them? And I wonder
Right.
how often that's the case, that venues have tickets available if you reach out directly. I know in many cases, like your favorite concert, you want to go see Taylor Swift, and then that's only sold through Ticketmaster or
Right.
whatever
Right.
it might be. You can't go directly to Fiserv Forum and buy your tickets. But there are places like these community theaters where you can do that.
Or you could at least start with the venue's website and then go where they lead you. If they lead you to Ticketmaster, that's the place to go. But
Right.
you can buy tickets directly through the Racine Theater Guild's website. But you're right. I mean, StubHub is kind of like Facebook Marketplace. You post something at the price you want. It doesn't mean someone is going to buy it, But at the same time, we spoke with a professor at Marquette University who specializes in marketing, and he said there are more protections in place for ticket scalpers on the sidewalk than there are for these people online. You have to show the face value of the ticket to the person you're selling it to on the sidewalk, but on these websites, you don't have to do that kind of thing.
Go ahead.
No, and I would
finish,
say StubHub would say, we're not cheating people. They are getting a ticket.
Yeah.
It's not like we're just
Yeah.
taking their money and giving them nothing. But the theater would say, but yeah, they're overpaying by so much. I will say I also went on their website today, StubHub's website, and those tickets are down to $77, which still, after you pay all the extra fees, that's like the equivalent of 3 tickets through the Racine Theater Guild.
Doesn't it kind of feel like somebody at StubHub thought these were tickets for Legally Blonde on Broadway? Because, I mean, even then, that would be a high ticket price.
Something else that bothered the theater is when StubHub advertised it on Facebook and on their website, it had images from other more professional performances like the Broadway
That seems
show.
really misleading.
And that's not the show that they were offering.
Did you reach out to them?
To StubHub?
Yeah.
So they basically said, we are a trusted resale platform. People can buy tickets safely and securely here. They will get their ticket. It's guaranteed. And StubHub will contact sellers and tell them if they think the price is too high and the ticket's unlikely to sell. But the seller doesn't have to do anything with that information unless they want to.
I was just thinking that idea of, and this is not to disparage community theater. I told you I went to the show, the best Christmas pageant ever, and the performance was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Would my enjoyment have been the same if I had paid $635 for that ticket? I probably would have said, well, this isn't Broadway. This is a local theater performance. So if someone buys that ticket and shows up expecting Legally Blonde on Broadway and they get the Racine Community Theater or Theater Guild, they're probably going to feel like they got ripped off.
Well, and they do so many things at the theater to keep their prices low. They're not going to have the big Broadway sets. They reuse set pieces year to year. They have people volunteering to design the sets, and they're getting their costumes at, Goodwill and Salvation Army from the high school's costume stock supply. They showed me their marching band uniforms that were donated by the high school. They are reusing pretty much everything. So they're aware that they're offering people a bargain but they also say the $635 is outrageous. You should not be paying that to see this show.
If you did pay $635 a ticket, I hope you saved one for me because I'll take it. I'm not paying you for it.
StubHub said they weren't aware of anyone
who actually
doing
paid.
that. But even those other websites that are offering it for $60, $70, $100, it's
still
still
way more.
a markup that the theater is not comfortable with.
What I want to say and what I
That's
think.
the reaction we all have, Sarah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What can people do? Like, it's one of those words that just, hey, be smart about it. Check the venue's website.
Right. I mean, when you're looking
Step
for these
one.
tickets, make sure you're scrolling down the Google page to go to their website and buy the tickets there. You'll save money on the cost of the ticket and on the fees. And it's just better for the theater too. Let's do that.
Seems like the kind of case that Elle Woods would take on. Wasn't that her name?
Sure.
That was
Elle
her
Woods?
name.
Yeah, that's what I thought. See, I remember
her
the movie.
power suit.
I remember. Anyway,
Elle Woods would get out the word about this.
there you go. We will take a break. When we come right back, we're going to go off the record. And it is time for us to go off the record. This is the part of the podcast where you get a little more casual and have a little fun by answering a question for which we have done no preparation. Of course, here to ask us that question is Sarah.
Funny enough,
do you
I
have?
haven't done any preparation either. Okay, we're talking about email etiquette, particularly maybe within the work environment.
Interesting.
So,
What have I done wrong?
well,
Yeah, me too. What did I do?
funny enough, I printed them out. No, I'm just kidding. Are you guys, when you send emails, interpersonal, so like, just within the office here, are you, do you skip the pleasantries? Do you get right to business? Are you a, hi, Jenna, exclamation point? Are you like extra exclamation points?
I think it depends on how many people I'm emailing.
Okay.
I tend to
Yep.
if I'm emailing every producer in the station, I
Yes.
might be like, hey, producers,
Yeah, right.
I'll do
because the
something like
group you're
that. But if
addressing,
it's just
right.
you guys, I'll probably jump just right into it.
Yeah.
I feel like if it's a colleague you work with routinely, there's no need for the, hey, everyone, good morning. Hope you're having a great Sunday.
Gosh,
But if you're reaching out to someone you don't often, there feels like there has to be some kind of introduction.
Before you launch into like,
Yeah.
can you come to the studio and do an interview on,
Right.
at 8 a.m. on Monday? How do you sign your emails? Are you like a sincerely, are you
I have a funny.
best?
This is something that, and AI starts to complete things after a while now. Like it's starting.
yeah, like
so
you don't know my life.
I have an email signature that's got my full name, FOX6
Yes.
Investigator,
Yep.
host of Open Record, blah blah blah. Here's my Facebook and Twitter. So it automatically is there. But it feels so formal that if I'm doing something that's more informal, or I'm emailing someone I'm trying to coax into talking to me on a story, I don't want just a formal signature.
Sure.
So I'll add my first, sincerely, or thank you, Brian.
I have,
But
yeah.
then it's
Thanks,
just first
exclamation
name.
point.
Thank you, Brian. But then there's my full signature below it.
Right.
So now it's
Okay.
actually redundant because it's Brian and then Brian Polcyn, whatever. I've started where now it's auto completing the Brian and Brian Polcyn in the
Oh,
whole signature. So
it
it's
knows.
actually, it knows how I do things. And I think it's probably redundant, but it feels too formal to just go full
Do
signature.
people care if you're too formal or not formal enough? What do you think? Because I usually assume people don't really care that much, right? Because people
Yeah.
respond to me in all sorts of different ways. Some people are super formal and some are not formal at all.
Right. And I just care about like the body of it, right? Like, did you answer my question, or
Yeah.
what is your ask of me? I don't, however you sign it is.
Do you guys ever use best?
What
People, instead of like sincerely
No,
or thank you,
oh,
it's-
like
it's
best,
like
best,
comma.
Brian
Or
Polcyn.
Cheers.
I feel like best
Oh.
is someone who's like one of those people who I'm busy, I got stuff to do, I'm cranking these out. They don't have a lot of greetings, and at the end it's best so and so.
Yeah. The only time I may have used that is if I'm giving someone bad news. So if someone emails me saying this
Soften.
happened, like I experienced this,
Oh,
I sent
okay.
all this money to
I see what
Nigeria and the woman loves me, but she's not coming here. Like sometimes I feel like I need to soften my exit from that email being like, I'm so sorry, you just lost thousands of dollars. You should probably go to the police, but they probably can't do
Best.
anything
But
about
then
it.
you say best. See, I feel like best is kind of like I don't have time to
feels
tell you.
patronizing, to be
I don't-
honest.
it doesn't feel like they
Yeah.
really
No,
are concerned
it-
about me
no.
experiencing the best. It's,
they don't want the best.
Yeah, they don't want the best for me at all.
You guys
It's-
are
it's
reading.
actually-
I feel like you guys read into things too much.
You know what,
Just
though?
take
So-
it at its word.
I am an old man. I know that I am an old man. I grew up in a time when
Yeah.
we wrote letters, and we had classes in school where they taught you the proper way to
Sure.
write a professional letter with the date
Yeah.
and then the address and the whatever and the salutations. And so I still structure my emails somewhat that way. And I think, especially a formal business email, and I don't feel like a lot of people do. I think a lot of people, it's just a paragraph and there's not much at the top.
Yeah.
And I think younger people I reach out to think, what an old man. He actually put good morning dash dash and then that kind of
Oh,
thing.
yeah, and he put two spaces
Yeah,
after.
right.
The other thing that I have found myself that I take out now, because I used to be like to the softening point, I'd be like, just checking in, wanted to see the status of this project, and someone was like, no, you take the just out.
Yeah, you just say
Like
checking in.
it sounds like you're like,
Yeah.
like
It
to
sounds
tiptoeing.
it almost
Right.
becomes passive aggressive at
Yes,
times.
or
it can
like,
be.
oh, sorry, am I bothering you? When really I'm meaning to bother you.
Yes,
Checking in. What is the status?
Hey, just checking in. Don't mean to bother you too much. Give me that report.
Yeah.
Right now, you're
Exclamation
overdue.
point.
Right. I don't know.
Can I share a story? When you guys were mentioning jumping into conversations, this happened to me in like a phone way. So I used to call my husband when our kids were little, and I would just jump into the conversation because like we were so busy.
Right.
I'd just be like, hey, the
Launch,
school
yeah.
called, Josie
Yes.
threw up or bit someone.
Yeah.
I would just jump into it. So
sound horrible.
my husband switched jobs and got a new cell phone. And I thought I deleted his old work number.
I love this
And
already.
I kid you not, I called whoever got his job at the new company at least 5 or 6 times and immediately jumped into the conversation and told this person like a monologue about our
Yes.
lives. And he always waited until I paused.
And then said,
It could be
not
like
your husband.
a minute into the conversation, he'd go, "Yeah, it's not
Mark.
John.
No.
It's me again." And after a while, I just went, "Ah," I
Here's
would
the
hang
funny
up.
story, though. Jenna, I have an old cell phone number of yours.
Do you?
Because you know who
right.
there's a person who has Jenna's old number.
feel bad for this
that I have
person.
called a number of times.
My old work
and
number.
This person is no longer entertaining the kindness of the sorry, not Jenna.
yeah.
So I have launched into things calling you before,
my
where the
Right.
person has just blurted out, "Not Jenna, hang up."
I feel.
And
I
I'm like,
really
"Oh,
feel
yeah."
for this
I
person.
think she's probably gotten a lot of calls.
Yeah, that number got a lot of calls. That's why I had to change my number.
Have you ever accidentally told someone, a work person, that you love them? You're
Well,
like,
just
"No."
because-
Yeah, just
like you're
because
used
like,
to
I love
talking
you,
to kids.
bye.
yeah, like, all
Yeah,
right, sounds
you
good.
know.
Love you. Bye.
Have you?
I don't.
Did you?
I can't remember if I ever have. I feel like maybe it's probably come close.
Oh, that's funny.
I have said those to people at the end of a conversation
yeah.
before, just because it was a thing you're used to saying, and
Yeah,
then it's very
that's funny.
awkward. Yeah. And then do you call it out, or do you just let it go? Like if you say that,
You
hang
laugh
up,
at them really hard.
I
and then-
absolutely. I'm like, I am mortified. I gotta go. Bye.
Or do you just hope they no? But I mean, if you say that and then hang up,
I would
like
have
you
to
know.
say something. There's no way I could just hang up. Then they would be like, what?
Anyway, we got to take a break. We'll wrap things up when we come right back. And we are out of time for Open Record. If you have a topic you'd like us to discuss on the show or an email, anyway, something you'd like us to do a story, whatever it is, send us an email. FOX6 Investigators at Fox.com. Sarah, Jenna, thank you. Tim Primo behind the video switcher, Kale Zimney, also, and Dave Machuda, our editor. Thanks to everybody. With that, I'm Bryan Polcyn. We'll be back next week.